I'm cool.
All right then. Well, let's get started, I guess.
Alright, well, I'm going to go live in 3.
So you're recording on the other thing as well?
Yep, I'm recording on OBS as well as Hangouts, alright?
Good.
Good to go.
And welcome back to the Brought to Light Masonic Podcast. I'm your host, Brother Jack Aquilina.
And I'm your host, brother, David Illingworth.
And this is episode 54 of the podcast, which is going to be dedicated to a discussion with our good friend Joseph, all the way from New Zealand. And we're going to be talking about New Zealand Freemasonry. But before we get into that, David, it is good to be back to episode 54 after we had a bit of a week listening to our American friends in Illinois show us how the podcast should really be running. The episode 53 was fantastic, and a big shout out to Bobby. But what was your reaction to that episode? I'm sure our listeners are a bit unhappy to hear our Australian accents back on the airwaves.
Oh, I absolutely loved it. It was so great to listen to our podcast and not be vain and just spend the time listening to myself. It was quite refreshing. I thought it was a great thing. The only thing I did think of is we're going to need to change our intro and outro because it refers specifically to Australian Freemasonry and the Victorian jurisdiction. I thought, now that we've got American hosts hosting Brought to Light, we're going to need to change that so it goes a bit more global. But no, they did a fantastic job, and I think it's safe to say they're going to put us out of a job if they keep going that good.
Well, they were saying, maybe we shouldn't put this to air because maybe we won't actually make air because they might say something inappropriate. But I was listening very carefully. I was trying to find any excuse not to release it. But Bobby and Tyler, you put us to shame. You did a really good job, and I know a lot of people probably enjoy the fact now that we're going to have the Brought to Light Masonic Podcast coming to you based on the Blue Land Social Club from not only the Southern Hemisphere but the Northern Hemisphere, giving you both two very unique perspectives. And I think something Bobby said, which was really good to sort of take note of, is although there's different expressions of Freemasonry in the jurisdictions, the problems are the same. So you're going to be seeing the same issues coming out from different angles. So I thought it was really encouraging, and a big shout out to Bobby and Tyler. What a great job. And we look forward to your next episode. Now I get excited about episodes coming out of the podcast that I actually haven't been part of the recording of. It's exciting. Very, very exciting. But David, there's no doubt to say that back to Victorian and Australian Freemasonry, there has continued to be a lot of news and events. So let's get straight into Masonic news. Brought to Light Masonic Podcast News. Your news on current affairs and events as they happen in Victoria and around the Masonic world. And we're back. And of course, Masonic news here in Victoria has been a big thing. We've had a lot of things developing from our last episode 52, which was obviously based on some of the big changes that have been happening in the Victorian jurisdiction, especially as it relates to the leadership surrounding the CEO, Grand Secretary, President of the Board of General Purposes, and all the other leadership positions that appear to be up in the air at the moment. But we can confirm the news has come through that Ms. Jane Sydenham-Clark, who was the CEO of Freemasons Victoria, has requested from the Board of General Purposes that her contract be released early. She was originally going to stick around to the 11th of May. That is no longer the case. The board have agreed to let her release early, and she's no longer CEO of Freemasons Victoria. So there you go, David. We're looking forward to seeing her staying around till May and letting the transition process happen, but it looks like things have been brought to head a lot quicker than we expected.
Well, that's the thing, and it is sad to see her go, as we discussed in a previous episode. But, I mean, it just goes to show one of these things of I wish there was a bit more information about it, as we have said before. But I think it is good that the board has allowed her to release her contract early. But as we'll be discussing shortly, it does open up to who's taking over the top job, as it were, and trying to get that person in and up to speed as quickly as possible so that there isn't that gap of leadership.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think that, in the end, on reflection, it was the best outcome probably. But rather than having someone on leave for 3 months in that position, with the transition probably being a bit prolonged, now we know where we're at. We need a new CEO, and the organisation is now in a position where it desperately needs to get those position descriptions put together and get this fixed. Because, as we said in episode 52, the process has been a shambles, and we're looking forward to this being resolved because the membership deserve it, and Freemasonry's reputation depends on the way in which we handle these matters. But talking about who has actually come in to replace Jane, they haven't appointed a new CEO, but they have created a new position, which is strange to me because it doesn't appear in the Constitution, but the board has appointed a gentleman by the name of Jeremy Cattrall as the head of operations of Freemasons Victoria. The head of operations being a role that's never existed before, and Jeremy being a consultant, and not a person who's experienced in CEO, governance, these sorts of things, but a consultant who's apparently advised a number of big companies about their restructures and was intimately involved in the consulting that Freemasons Victoria paid for to set up the new structure, which we've discussed, which is the three-headed beast structure of the separation of powers between the administration and the Masonic. Now, one thing I did notice, David, and it'd be interesting to hear your views on this, in the email sent out by the Deputy Grand Master who announced this, who is still the President of the Board, he said, "We acknowledge that there is likely to be a potential conflict in Jeremy's appointment. However, they're confident in his capacity to be able to perform the position." Now, as they say, when someone says something is potentially there, playing it down as much as you possibly can, which you'd expect anyone to do, I think that highlights the fact that there is probably a conflict of interest here. That being that Jeremy he was a consultant for the organisation, he was put in a position where he was advising the organisation and his job was to set up new structures, and also is a great personal friend of the Deputy Grand Master. So, what do you reckon? Potential conflict or conflict? I think there's more than meets the eye here.
If you have to say there may be potential conflict, unfortunately to me that says there's 100% there is a conflict of interest. Now, you can get around that. There's no issues necessarily with being there a conflict of interest, especially in our organisation, unless he was the number one provider of Masonic regalia, for example. Then you could go, well, he could just come in and go, everyone buys from me from now on. Big conflict. If it's just a conflict of, I've worked with this person in the past, okay, might be an issue. But if it's more of a conflict of, I currently work with this person, he's my boss, I'm doing this as a favour for him, so he'll help me out in the real world, then that's more of an external conflict. And I think as an organisation, while it's not good and we shouldn't necessarily be condoning it, we can probably get around it because it's not going to affect us directly. So I'd want more information on what that potential conflict may be before anything else.
I think that goes to our point. I mean, this is once again the same critique that not only us, I mean, we're really only reflecting the views of the membership, and I mean what we say is projected 1,000 times through the membership before we even get to air. And the reality is, the communication process, the lack of transparency, the lack of what appears to be a strategic sort of approach to the transition is emphasised now by an email saying we've appointed this guy in a rush into a new role that never existed, and there might be a potential conflict of interest. There's a burden on the organisation, or any organisation, to make sure that it's transparent. Like you said, this conflict of interest is probably nothing. It probably could easily be overcome through processes and checks and balances, but you can't just send out an email saying there's a potential conflict and not articulate what the conflict is. So we call on them to be more transparent, and the membership does as well. There are great concerns already, a lot of anxiety in the membership for good reason. The only way we're going to transition into the really positive future we've got is by having people feeling as though things are being run properly, above board, on the level, by the square. That sounds Masonic, doesn't it? In a way that you'd expect Freemasons to conduct business. So we're calling on them to disclose those conflicts of interest, and I'd like to see more transparency from the top, because the only way we're going to get through this is if people know what the hell is happening and why it's happening, and believe it or not, people know things, they're more likely to accept it. Funny that.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And the reality is, if it is just a simple matter of it's a external business conflict, then okay, we can put processes in place to nullify that conflict. Just saying, there's a conflict, no, I'm sorry, that doesn't indemnify anybody. If you're worried about it, you need to get it out there in the open and put measures in place to ensure that it doesn't become a conflict.
Exactly right. Well, I think we'll move on. Let's just talk about the extraordinary, what I'm calling extraordinary events that have taken place in New South Wales. In fact, in New South Wales, they've had an election process where the members get to directly vote for the next Grand Master at the quarterly communication. Anyone with a rank of Master Mason or above can attend the quarterly and vote. So it is really dependent on who's in the room. It's not a postal vote that goes out to all members or whatever it is. So it's about getting the numbers in the room on the day. Now, there were 4 candidates, one of which, Most Worshipful Brother Derek Robson, a past Grand Master who served as Grand Master 2 or 3 years ago, was putting his hat back at the rear. He must have thought, I'm coming back. I'm doing a comeback. Now, for Victorians, and I don't know what it's like in New Zealand, Joseph, but for Victorians, there's a limit on how long you can serve as Grand Master. You've got a lifetime limit of 2 terms, and you can't come back. I'm guessing it's the same in New Zealand?
They serve for 3 years here.
3 years, okay. But you don't usually come back after you've done your 3 years, do you?
No.
No. Well, so similar here. We've got a 2-year thing. They've got a 3-year thing. But most worshipful brother Derek has put his hat in the ring, and he has been re-elected. It's an incredible thing, and what an exercise of democracy. A past Grand Master making a comeback and becoming the new Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of New South Wales, the Australian Capital Territory, defeating. And this is a status that they put up on their Facebook. It said convincingly beating the other candidates in the 3rd round of exhaustive ballot. A deputy Grand Master, a person who was supposed to be or expected to be the next Grand Master, was defeated in that ballot. So, incredible. What an incredible exercise of democracy.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's interesting that they've done that. I mean, I'd like to know more information to find out sort of more specifics on it. But if they've done the dodgy to bring someone in, then they owe it to the membership to say why they've done it that way. There could very well be a great reason why they've done it. This guy's has the best plan. He's going to take the craft forward. But if it's just, he's a mate of mine, no, I'm sorry, I don't buy that. You can't bypass democracy that way.
Well, exactly right. So it's an incredible process, and I think we've been calling on the board to be directly elected here, and we still maintain that, obviously. But it's interesting. The membership, given the power to do things, might do things that are unexpected. But at the end of the day, democratically elected people, they have that legitimacy, they have that mandate. So we congratulate Most Worshipful Brother Derek, and we wish him all the best for his 2nd or 3rd term in the job, having been elected as Grand Master again. What an incredible opportunity. So I think that's enough for news. Let's get into, obviously, our need to promote our wonderful sponsors, who we all love. And I know that, David, you're the best person to put in the pitch, almost as good as what Bobby did last episode on the Brought to Light Masonic Podcast. So maybe give a bit of an intro to our sponsors, the Happy Mason Shop.
Oh, absolutely. It's always a pleasure to basically do the intro for our sponsors. They are, by all means, our best sponsor. And while we do have a few others up, as we've said in the past, and I assure them, we are working on recording them. We've just been a bit busy in doing the fine-tuning, but we will have them up shortly. But the Happy Masons, if you need it, just check them out. But now, nobody can say it better than Jack. So now, a word from our sponsors.
The Happy Mason Shop, the official sponsor of the Brought to Light Masonic Podcast and the Blue Lounge Social Club. Supporting Freemasons wherever they may be scattered across both Australia and the world globally, the Happy Mason Shop is providing you with access to some of the world's most finest Masonic regalia at the most competitive and affordable prices. Do you need new aprons for your lodge? Whether it be your tatty entered apprentice aprons or fellow craft aprons that need replacing, or whether it be other furnishings or items it could use to enhance your lodge's presence, or are you being raised to a sublime degree of a Master Mason and require your own Master Mason's apron and don't want to use that second-hand apron that the lodge is offering you? Then jump on the happymasonshop.com.au, click on the Blue Lounge link, and purchase those items to provide yourself with access to some of the UK's best handmade Masonic wares that have been imported into Australia and provided to you at the best affordable price, courtesy of the Happy Mason Shop. The Happy Masons and the Blue Lounge Social Club are united in their sponsorship and partnership, focusing on the recruitment, retention and education support of young Masons and the achievement of Masonic excellence. So check out their store. Every purchase you make via the Blue Lounge link will result in support for us and this podcast, which the Happy Masons are proud to sponsor. So, what are you waiting for? Get your new Masonic regalia at thehappymasonshop.com.au.
Welcome back, and that was a word from the Happy Mason store, our fantastic favourite sponsors, and thank you so much for their support in pursuing Masonic excellence. Now guys, episode 54 is dedicated to a discussion about New Zealand Freemasonry, and I want to do a bit of an introduction before he introduces himself, because we're very honoured today to have a guest on our show Brother Jozef, and I had to butcher his last name. We tried testing it before the show started, but excuse me, Jozef. Horopapera, I think that's right. Anyway, we'll get to that. We'll get him to fix it later. But we've got to... Sorry, you can jump in and tell us how to pronounce your last name now, Jozef, maybe.
Should I do the name or like the full-on greeting?
Do the whole thing. Give us the whole experience.
Greetings, brethren. I'm Brother Jozef Horopapera from Lodge Upnui, number 395 in the Aquilina district, Northern Division, under the Grand Lodge of Ancient Free and Accepted Masons of New Zealand.
There you go.
New Zealand Constitution.
Thank you so much, Jozef. And you know, the way you said it was so much better than me, so we're glad that we got you to do that. But we are honoured to have Jozef on today because Jozef has been one of, I'd have to say, singling him out in the world, one of the biggest supporters and fans of the Blue Lounge Social Club and also the Brought to Light Masonic Podcast. There's very few episodes that go by that Jozef doesn't listen to. I'm sure he's almost listened to all of them. And
yeah, for sure.
We get constant feedback from Jozef, and whenever I'm in doubt, I usually ask him, what do you think about this? So it's good to have you on, finally on the show, a fan who we're humbled to have on. So welcome to the show, Jozef, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to come speak to us today.
Yeah, thanks heaps.
Now, Jozef, what we want to do today is, and we're not claiming that you're a historian or an expert on New Zealand Freemasonry, because we're definitely not experts on Australian Freemasonry, but you'll know more than us. So I've got a few questions for you, and I was hoping maybe you could give us an insight into what it's like across the ditch. Obviously, New Zealand and Australians have a wonderful, close relationship, a bit of a rivalry in some respects, but a close relationship. So you're really only 3 hours away from Melbourne in the sense of to physically get to New Zealand. So you're pretty close. New Zealand almost became a state of Australia back in the original days of the Commonwealth. So it's interesting to see the close relationship. But I was wondering if you could paint the picture about, maybe tell us about how you came to Freemasonry in New Zealand, what inspired you to join, and maybe the story behind that in as much detail as you've got.
Probably back in the mid-90s, like, because I lived in central Auckland, and there's like a whole heap of Masonic lodges wherever you go, like in almost every suburb.
Mm-hmm.
Probably in the late 2000s when I was studying in Auckland, the way I used to go to uni, I'd pass at least 6 lodge buildings. Like, back then I didn't know exactly what Masonry was until my friend who's a member, I didn't know at the time he was a member, he hit me up one time and it kind of went from there. After I graduated, I came back to Whakatane, and like, I guess bored being here because like Whakatane life's like super laid back. I went to a business and leisure show here back in 2015 and got initiated that same year.
Oh wow! So it was your friend that inspired you to join?
He had a big impact, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. What sort of things did he say, or in conversation, that made you think, I'm going to have a look at this? Was it something he said, or is it just the fact that you wanted to know what he was doing when he was going to lodge?
One thing me and him got up to a lot during uni is would like do overnight missions at an internet cafe and play games and all that.
Yep.
And he'd often bring his suitcase and all that. And that's when I started asking.
Ah, so it's the Masonic briefcase that he's bringing along. You're saying, what's in there?
Yeah.
Okay, so you ended up joining, and you did your initiation. And do you remember much about that experience? What was that like? What impact did that have on you?
Once they put the blindfold on, I knew I couldn't turn back, sort of thing. And then when I heard the door open, like my heart just sunk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and through my head I was like, geez, I can't believe I'm actually doing this right now. And then, yeah.
I think a lot of people think like that. I definitely did. I remember them putting it on and going, oh no, what have I done? I joined. But so it sounds like you went through a similar experience. So you had your first degree, and I have to say, following you on Facebook and talking to you, you're probably one of the most enthusiastic Freemasons I've ever met. You do a lot of things. You must go to lodge frequently. So tell us a little bit about what really, after you joined, inspired you to sort of get so involved. Like, what did you like about it the most?
Oh, the number of factors, really. Like, one thing I do a lot that you see on Facebook is I travel a lot throughout the country, particularly Auckland, because that's where I grew up and all that. I wanted to use my energy in a positive manner instead of a negative.
So it's all about using your energy to sort of do a positive contribution to the world around you. And you're really involved in charities, and I know you're always plugging something online. And it sounds like you've really immersed yourself in the community. But so is that because of Freemasonry, or were you like that before you joined Freemasonry?
I was like that well before I joined the craft. Yeah.
Yeah. So Freemasonry's just added that extra value to that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. Okay, so you joined the craft, and tell us a little bit about maybe your district or the area that you're in. Are there a lot of young people in New Zealand Freemasonry, or are you a bit like us in terms of there's only a few here and there?
In my district alone, there's probably not as much as there are elsewhere throughout the country.
Yeah.
The majority of young people are in Auckland, in the city.
Okay, so there's a lot of young people in the city. Okay, well, that's interesting. And how old are you, Joseph?
Yeah, I just turned 33 last week.
Yeah, so you are a really young Mason in comparison to the average age. And what's that been like for you, considering you've not had many young blokes in your district? What's that been like for you?
Daunting.
Yeah, daunting, because you got a lot of older blokes around you.
In a way that's good, because I guess they sort of concentrate on me because I'm the youngest, and they try to offload as much as they can, which is good. Yeah,
which means you get the mentoring and attention. So let's talk about that. So in terms of some of the people you've met through Freemasonry, I'm guessing you've made really good friends and mentors. Maybe you could give our people, maybe someone who's listening who's never joined Freemasonry or is thinking about joining, maybe you could talk about some of the relationships you've built and maybe some of the positive impacts it's had on your life.
Like the positive, like the entire journey's been positive. There's nothing negative yet.
Yeah.
Despite what you see on Facebook, I have been pulled up a couple of times, but nothing major.
Nothing major. It's amazing. I thought that you sort of join this organisation. I guess you'd never meet some of the people you've met in Lodge if you're just walking on the street, sort of thing.
No, for sure.
And some of the older guys, I think, are really, really important because they give you, that insight and that life experience that you otherwise don't have. And I know that, especially going through office and the rest, that it can be a big thing, and having them there to support you is pretty important. But maybe you should talk about, you obviously take an office in your lodge. I think you're junior warden at the moment. Is that right?
Deacon.
Deacon, yep, Deacon. Okay, and so maybe talk about office. What's that been like for you, and maybe talk about what that some of the support you've had going through office, because it's not easy.
No, definitely not easy. I started off as inner guard, and that was a bit daunting enough. Like trying to remember how to introduce people when they come in, especially Grand Lodge officers.
Yes.
Because our installation's in October, and that's when I got promoted to junior deacon. That's probably not as bad as in the guard, I guess, but like you just do a lot of walking around and whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah, like an upside to junior deacons, like it builds your confidence to be in front of people.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Of course it does. Yeah. Have you had any chances to do any first degrees as junior deacon, or?
Not yet. No.
Not yet. Yeah, that's another challenge.
As soon as I became in the guard last year, they hit me with a third degree.
Oh wow, that's a big thing to start off with. Jeez.
See, that's all like me. My lodge, or Jack and I's lodge, made me in the guard, filling in for a brother who was unfortunately ill. I think we had one general business meeting, and then straight into second degrees, after second degree, third degrees. The only one I haven't done is a first degree, and by the looks of it, I will not be doing one until I go up to junior deacon in, I think it's now August.
Yes.
So, and then I'm led to believe we've got a couple of first degrees coming up, so that should be fun.
Yeah, it should be fun. It's always a big challenge. What do you think the hardest thing about going to office has been for you, Joseph? Has it been remembering the stuff, or remembering where to move, or is it speaking in front of people? What do you think the hardest thing has been?
The hardest thing would be remembering what to do.
it's always difficult.
The talking side of things is easy as piss.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's all good. You can say.
That's the easy part, but because we've only had 2 meetings so far this year, and I'm still getting around what to do and what not.
Yeah. But I guess the more you do it, the more comfortable you feel. And do you want to go through to the east, or?
It's not my ambition, but it would be cool to sit up there someday.
And it's the same in New Zealand in terms of the lodge sets you up for progressive office, and you're expected to make your way slowly through, or is it more relaxed?
Bit of both.
Bit of both. All right, that's good to hear, because I guess one of the biggest things we hear about from young Masons in Australia, at least, is the pressure they feel when they join a lodge, especially if the lodge is a bit older, and they're the only young person. The pressure for them to go into office and go through the chairs is pretty hard on them, especially if they've got young families and these sorts of things.
Yeah.
But maybe one thing that would be interesting as well is, like you're saying earlier, you're very involved in charity, and you're involved in a lot of other organisations. How do you your work and all these things? So how do you separate your time? I mean, it must be really hard to sort of find time to do all that, and you seem to do it with such ease. So, any tips on time management? Because maybe I could learn from you.
There's a method to my madness. Technically, like especially with Ryan and Kerry, if I haven't got time, I'll make time for them.
Yeah.
There's a few reasons why. I guess the only time I've got time to do stuff is when I'm reading the Blue Book.
Yeah.
Like I don't really have to read it, but I do.
Yeah.
Just to keep everything in check.
Interesting. So I mean, shows you can be busy and still achieve quite a bit in your life, which is great.
Plus, I've always got my phone in my hand as well when I'm on the go.
Yeah, so you can chuck it in. So I'm guessing your calendar's well used.
Yeah.
Because we've been obviously trying to work out a time that you're available and I'm available for this podcast, and I've sort of learnt very quickly that you're quite a busy person. But it's amazing to see what you do, and I wish more young Freemasons were as involved in you are, because you clearly get a lot out of it, right?
For sure.
Which is great.
But Jack, I think that highlights what we've been saying for a while, which would be like the benefit of a virtual lodge. For a lot of young members coming through these days, getting time to go to lodge can often be difficult. But if you're on the go working or at home with the family and going, I can get away for an hour and just dial into my lodge meeting, how good would that be? Being able to do that.
Yeah, it'd be pretty awesome. And I think that Joseph, you've indicated you might be interested in joining the virtual lodge that's been set up here in Victoria for that very reason. So
No, definitely.
It'd be cool. I mean, it'd be awesome to be able to sit in lodge with you and share that experience. And clearly, we're going to have to come over to New Zealand and visit. And we've been trying to organise things, but it is difficult. Although it's only 3 hours away, it's always difficult. But one other thing, I guess, I was interested in knowing is, in terms of how big is Freemasonry in New Zealand? You don't have to have exact numbers, but is it something that's growing, or are the numbers also struggling a little bit there as well? Or maybe give us an idea of what you understand about that.
At the moment, there's roughly 6,000 or 7,000 members nationally. Back in the World War II days, there was like 60,000, 70,000.
Wow.
Over the years, it sort of dwindled down, and then
Interesting. And the numbers, because I know that New Zealand Freemasonry has set up this fantastic initiative called the Speak Out campaign, which I'll get you to talk about maybe in a minute. But do you feel lodges in your area are growing, or are they facing sort of similar problems to our lodges and they're struggling with numbers?
Away from the big cities, they're struggling. Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah. The country always feels it first, don't they? Definitely the case. Same here. So maybe tell us about this Speak Out campaign, because you've been a big sort of promoter of that. That's the Grand Masters initiative, isn't it?
Yeah. Back at the Grand Installation, the most worshipful brother Mark Winger, Grand Master, put together a campaign called Speak Up for Freemasonry. It gives us Masons the confidence to speak about Freemasonry to the general public. I guess is like you don't have to feel scared to talk about it. Like as he says, it's 90%, 98% open to the public. Yes. Only 2% that's not.
That's very, very true, and it's good to see that New Zealand's really embracing that approach of promotion. Our current Grand Master, most worshipful brother Don Reynolds, has been promoting the wearing of Masonic pins and showing people subtly that you are a Freemason. But I mean, just using your life as an example, how many people in your immediate friendship group would know you're a Freemason? I'm guessing a lot of people, because your Facebook so obviously says you are. But you know, how do you go about telling people that you're a Freemason? Because it's obviously a big part of your life.
But like before I made it apparent that I was a Freemason, yeah, that was it. It's when I started wearing rings and caps that they started asking questions.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And along with it, they're like saying, "Oh, it's evil this, evil that, devil this, devil that," and I was like, "No, there's absolutely nothing like that.
Yeah.
There's no such thing. They watch too much YouTube."
I must admit, I got that when I was initiated. I put photos up on my Facebook, and a friend of a mate of mine who I'm friends with on Facebook messaged me and goes, "Oh, are you a Freemason?" I said, "Yeah, I am." He goes, "Oh, my mum says it's an evil death cult." I'm like, I wish it was that exciting. And no, it's quite boring, really. And I explained to him what we actually do, and he goes, "Oh, okay." I said, "If you want to find out more, mate, check out your local Grand Lodge. They'll be more than happy to tell you what we actually are about."
Do you think, Joseph, you've changed some minds by having those conversations with people?
Oh, definitely. Not to offend anyone, but it's like probably the hard-out Christians that don't agree with it.
Yeah, yeah. So there is a bit of a religious opposition to Freemasonry, isn't there? Which is sort of been something that's happened throughout history, which is funny because, and you'd know as well, I guess one of the best things we do is bring people of all religions together. I mean, it's
yeah, for sure.
It's one of the. I mean, I can't think of any other organisation that does that. But in New Zealand, would you say that the majority of the membership is of Christian orientation, or do you have a good diversity?
A good diversity. In my district alone, there's a lot of Catholics.
Oh, fantastic! Oh, wow! Jeez, that's incredible. Considering the history of the Catholic Church with Freemasonry, that's really positive to see that they're embracing the craft. And so, in terms of one other thing, I guess, which was interesting about New Zealand, obviously, like Australia, there is a population of Indigenous people who, you know, who had, you know, control and custodianship of the land before European settlers came along and settled. And obviously the history in New Zealand is very different to Australia in terms of there was a settlement, and the Maori culture, which is what I'm speaking about, is a big proud aspect of New Zealand society and culture. And clearly everything, at least from an outside perspective, everything we see about New Zealand has a balance between that colonial and European and also Maori culture, which is really positive. So how does that affect Freemasonry? Are there many members of the Maori community in Freemasonry?
Throughout my journey so far, I've met quite a few. There's also a group called the Māori Brethren Association, who I haven't touched base with yet. Just recently I found out there's such a thing as the working tools of a Māori Mason.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think I still got that on Facebook. Yeah, that kind of blew me away. And like so many weeks ago when me and you were talking about what's going to be spoken about on here, I took it on board to like full on research about the Māori influence on Freemasonry in this country.
Interesting. And what did you find in terms of your investigations about Maori influence? As obviously it's been bigger than what some people would expect.
Roughly 80 to 90% of the lodges here under a Māori name. And
does that include your lodge as well?
Yep.
Interesting. And so obviously that's a recognition of the fact that embracing that sort of cultural heritage as well. And something, I can't think of many lodges that are named after Aboriginal names here, David. I know Arana is. That's one of the lodges that is. So there's a couple, but it sounds like there's quite a few lodges that are named after Maori tradition, which is excellent.
Yeah, it's interesting that there aren't more, but oddly enough, I was speaking with a brother the other day who works for a department that names streets for new estates and things, and he said he really wanted to pay homage to the Aboriginal elders and name a number of streets after Aboriginal names. And the interesting thing I found that he told me was that it's really hard to get street names as Aboriginal names because a lot of the elders don't want their language like used in that manner.
Ah.
So it sounds like there's a much different sort of approach to sort of our Indigenous people versus in New Zealand, which I think is fantastic that they've seemed to be a lot further along than unfortunately we are.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it sounds like Maori members of the community are indispensable in Freemasonry in terms of they're very important in what Freemasonry does. And so you're saying there's associations that are focusing on this diversity and trying to ensure that the Maori influence is recognised. And I think you sent me a paper on the Maori influence of Freemasonry, Joseph, which we'll put in the show notes as well, so people can read because there's a lot in that. Is there anything else you want to say about that, or?
I guess like the racial relationship between Freemasonry and Māori has a lot to do with the Treaty of Waitangi as well.
Yep, I think from what I understand, roughly it was a treaty between the Maori inhabitants of New Zealand and the colonial powers, saying we're going to access land based on terms and these sorts of. It was just an agreement for colonisation. I think what it was we had no such agreement with the Indigenous inhabitants of Australia. There's been no treaty, which is one of the big differences between New Zealand's treatment of Indigenous peoples versus us. So it's been really, really interesting. So clearly it flows from that, and I can understand how Freemasonry would be more acceptable to Maori communities who are a really big part of the culture of New Zealand, which is fantastic. So tell me, obviously New Zealand's you got the North Island and the South Island. You're in the north, is that correct? Yep, good, I got that right. And because of that, there's more population on which island, and in terms of Freemasonry, more lodges on which island?
Definitely a lot more people on the North Island. Masonically, there's three divisions: Northern, Central, and Southern. The South Island's completely Southern division. Anywhere below the Bay of Plenty is Central Division, and anywhere above the Bay of Plenty is Northern.
Yep.
Within those divisions, there's a handful of districts.
Interesting. And each district, are they headed by a district coordinator or a district deputy grand master, or who leads those districts?
A divisional grand master and his team, and then from there it goes to the district grand master, and then the worshipful master and his officers. Interesting.
Yeah, that's a little bit different to us again in terms of having the district grand master. It's interesting seeing how it works in different jurisdictions. In New South Wales, they have a district inspector of workings who's the head guy. In Victoria, we have these things called district coordinators. Overseas, in the US, they have what's called district deputy grand masters. And you guys sound like you've got a similar system to the UK with they've got the provincial grand masters in their teams. You've got the district grand masters in their team. So that's really interesting. And so if you want to serve in the grand team or the grand line, would you? Does the grand master have his own team, or would you have to go to one of your district teams?
Probably first pop, you'll go through the district team before going to national level.
Interesting.
That's my dream job. I like to be on the National Grand Lodge team. That
would be good. That'd be awesome. So that must mean you have a real sort of interest in ritual. You must really love doing ritual.
It's pretty cool, to be honest. Like, it's like doing a play, I guess.
It is. Yeah, that's a good description.
You get to express yourself and stuff.
That's a very good point. So before you joined Freemasonry, say if you could talk to yourself now, say before you were Freemason, you could talk to yourself. What would you say? What advice would you give to yourself joining Freemasonry? Would you change anything, or would you just let it take the same journey you've taken at the moment?
It's hard to say. Like, all I know is I've completely changed since back then. That's for sure.
And Freemasonry's played a role in that, has it?
Definitely.
Maybe give us an example. Do you feel more confident? Is that what's changed, or you feel like you're a better person?
Not only do I feel like a better person, I'm not as shy as I used to be.
Yeah.
I used to be a pretty quiet dude once upon a time, and then when it came to doing the first degree test questions, that's when I started opening up.
It's fantastic. That's really, really, really awesome. So if you told yourself 5 years ago or 6 years ago that you're going to be on a Masonic podcast, you probably would have said you're joking. Fantastic. So, I mean, I guess, David, that's one of the great things about Freemasonry, isn't it? I mean, Joseph's given us an example of the fact that, it really does help you build those leadership and public speaking and just personal confidence, which is so important, because that was so important for many aspects of life, not just Freemasonry.
Well, that's the thing. It is interesting. And I mean, I found that Freemasonry, they say, like, what's one of the big lessons that you learn? And the big lesson is public speaking. And when you think about it, so many people have issues with public speaking. And I mean, I'm one of them. I tend to, whenever I'm in a public speaking scenario, tend to waffle on. I know what I have to say, but I just go off on wild tangents. So it's very hard to keep me to a coherent response.
Our listeners have never experienced that, I'm sure.
I know. I'm sure they never have. It's a bit like you, Jack. You go up for a 10-minute speech, and 17 hours later, everyone's like, "Is it done yet?" No, I'm only 10% through. So I think it's fantastic that that's what the craft does offer, and it's something that I think that we need to push more of and say it's not the teachings that we teach aren't all metaphysical changes in yourself and spiritual or anything like that. It's more practical. We empower you to public speak. Because think about it, if you're in front of a lodge room, no brother in that lodge room is going to criticize you for giving it a go.
Yeah,
and if
sure.
they do, every other brother in there is going to pounce on them and say, how dare you criticize another brother. So that's what I absolutely love about Freemasonry. You could make a complete hash of it. Everyone will say, thanks for giving it a go, you did a good job.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think it's a really supportive environment, and yeah, but in saying that, because you get to be so close and friendly with your brothers and you really care about what they think, sometimes the scary thing you can do is stand up in lodge and speak, because you don't want to let your brothers down. It's not that they're going to jump on you and criticise you, it's just that you want to do a good job for them, especially when you're part of a team, Joseph, right? You want to make sure the standard is as good as the rest of the team's doing. It's a little bit of pressure, but it's not bad pressure, it's good pressure. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
So it's really interesting to hear that that's what's changed in terms of your life, and it's really, really encouraging, because I think a lot of people who are listening, Joseph, would really get a lot out of the fact that you've had that experience, because what a better skill to have than self-confidence. It's absolutely incredible. So clearly your life has changed for the better. We do say we're making good men better, so it's fantastic to see. Do you have any advice for anyone who's joining Freemasonry or thinking about it? Is there anything in particular you think that they should think over or do before they should join Freemasonry?
If anything, just don't be shy.
Yeah. Feel free to go to your local lodge and knock on the door, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Make the...
Or search on Google.
Or search on Google, yes. And if we... obviously, the Grand Lodge in New Zealand's got a website, so if you are interested in joining, you can go through the Grand Lodge website, can't you?
Yep.
So we'll...
freemasonsnz.org.
Yep, no problem. We'll put that in the links, and you heard Joseph talk about that. So if you are in New Zealand and you want to join, please make sure you go through the website. And Joseph, I'm sure if anyone's got any questions or would like to speak to you to ask about your experiences, they can we can send through the email and they can contact you. Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, for sure, yep.
No problem at all. All right, well, look, I've only got a couple of things left before we wrap up the interview. And David, I think we've had a really good opportunity to learn a lot about New Zealand Freemasonry, and in particular, Joseph, your journey as well. I was just wondering one other thing, and that is in terms of the way you guys are going about, growing the craft. What sort of things are you doing personally to try and bring people in, but not only just bring them in, but keep them? Is there anything in particular that's happening out there that you think is working?
If anything, I like, especially with new initiates, I show them a lot of love and support. So, so they know they're not alone, and if they need someone, I'm always there.
Yeah, I think that's important, isn't it? That's very, very important.
Yeah, with my journey, I didn't really have there was definitely love there, but not as much support as I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I can relate to that, and I think David can relate to that. In fact, that's something why the Blue Lounge has been so big, because we're, like you're doing, we're providing that support directly to people in a way that helps them feel like they're not alone, and I guess more importantly, showing younger guys there is a future. Because some people join lodges and they look around and they say, I love this, I love all the people, but the reality is they're all 70 and I don't know what happens when they go. Like, what do I do? So it's good to show people that there is a future, and that the older guys, the work they've put in is not going to just die. It's going to continue for many generations in the future. I know with people like you involved, New Zealand Freemasonry is really lucky. They've got a bright future ahead, because there's no better advocate than you. I mean, you've been a real champion for New Zealand Freemasonry. So I guess I can say thank you, because we want New Zealand Freemasonry to continue as much as we do everywhere else. So thank you for the work you do, Joseph.
Shot, man.
Now, Joseph, is there anything else you think we've missed that you want us to cover, or do you think we've given our listeners a good insight into New Zealand Freemasonry?
I'm going to be a bit cheeky and ask who created Pavlova, New Zealand or Australia?
Opening up the cultural divisions here. It's a good question. Well, what's your answer to that question?
I don't care. It's nice anyway.
Well, look, I'm going to adopt that very diplomatic approach.
That's the true Masonic response. I don't care who made it. It tastes nice.
And you never get between a Freemason and their Pavlova, that's for sure. That's definitely the case. Well, Joseph, thank you very much for that. And please continue to stick around. We're going to go into some shameless plugs and promoting upcoming events. And I'm sure you've got some things you'd like to sort of promote upcoming in New Zealand, in your district. But thank you on behalf of the Brought to Light Masonic podcast. Thank you not only for your support and love and for being a great listener of this show. Thank you for coming on and answering some of our questions about New Zealand Freemasonry. We really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thanks heaps.
No problem at all. Okay, well, David, let's get into some shameless plugs now. I know this is probably your least favourite part of the podcast, because let's face it, with your wedding life, you know, the clock is ticking down, your mortality is being ever more present, and you're realising my life will be ending soon. No more drinks out with the boys, no more nights at the strip club, none of these things anymore. So, look, I commiserate, but you don't really have much else to plug, I'm guessing, because your life is really focused on this wedding at the moment. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much, Jack. Candy's very upset that I won't be there every Friday night with yourself. But I've assured her that you'll be there without fail. In fact, she's very happy you've been redoubling your efforts and have been turning up every single night. She's been able to put her kids through Harvard, all 17 of them. So your support is invaluable there. But no, for me, Masonically, I've actually got a busy couple of weeks on. Next week, I'm going in as I've got Lodge Cornucopia meeting, where I'm filling in as their junior deacon. So I've never done it before, and I only have had one lodge of instruction, which we had the other night, showing me what to do. So I've assured them that I'll be rough, but I'll give it a fair crack. Then we've got I think it's a second or third degree at Brunswick United in the week after. And then potentially as well, next week as well, I'm going to go to a new lodge I've never been to before. I'm going to do my very best to get there anyway. In Berwick, just nearby, scouting it for a mate of mine who's considering joining there. So I thought I'll go there in advance, check it out, see what the guys are like. So if you're listening from the Berwick, I think it's Balaclava Lodge, or maybe pronounced differently. I'm sure they'll tell me on the night. I'm going to be getting in contact with I'm just trying to work out if I can make it, but if I can, I'll be sure to be there. But other than that, you're 100% right. Just wedding planning away.
Yes, it sounds like a very interesting life. It's good to see that you're getting out and about. And, you know, David, Candy and I are very upset that we're not going to be sharing that experience with you any longer, but I'm sure we can make exceptions to the rule. But in terms of events coming up for me, Masonically, I thought I'd run you through a few things. Now, we do obviously have on the 26th of March at the Springvale Lodge, separate word, Springvale, Welshpool brother Robert Billing is going to be presenting the first degree tracing board, and he's going to be doing that as an official event of the South East Mornington district of the Blue Lounge Social Club. So make sure you get along to that and support what's going to be a fantastic night in Freemasonry. Now, Rob does that first degree tracing board by himself. He does it beautifully, and he answers questions at the end. I think that's a pretty good package deal. So get along on 26th of March. The event's on the Blue Lounge Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Blue Lounge Vic, and you can obviously access that through the show notes. On the 9th of April now, you would have recalled us talking about the founding meeting for the Virtual Lodge in Victoria. That's been moved from the 29th of March through to the 9th of April because of some scheduling issues with the Grand Lodge rehearsals. Obviously, Worshipful Brother Dominic is on the Grand Lodge team, and the Grand Director of Ceremonies was not prepared to provide him a hall pass. But look, nonetheless, we've moved it to the 9th of April. It's going to happen there. We're going to be trying to stream it so our international guests can get involved and be part of the meeting. So that will be at 7:30 at the Brunswick Masonic Centre at 9 on the 9th of April. So make sure you get along to that. Now, David,
I'll be there.
I've got a few things I need to say about the paper that I presented. I suppose I should have done this in news, but I never really know if it constitutes news. obviously, when I released that surprise guest hosting episode of the Whence Came You Masonic Podcast, and if anyone here listens to Whence Came You, Robert Johnson's podcast, I had the honour of being able to guest host an episode, which was very nerve-wracking, but at the same time also very exciting. I did release an insight into one of the first chapter of the paper I'm writing, which is about the changing role of women. And geez, it hasn't been one of those things that has sort of just got put on, on the list of things to listen to and never got listened to. It's had a bit of an impact. So clearly, it was on the Whence Came You Masonic podcast. It sparked a huge debate on Reddit, on YouTube, on the internet. It was a fantastic discussion, very positive, and I was very pleased with the fact that it had that sort of influence. And then all of a sudden, I flick on the Masonic Roundtable, and they've also discussed it as well. So it's sort of a great reaction, David. And I know that you've said maybe too much love gets thrown my way, but I suppose you should.
It's an absolutely fantastic reaction. I'm just waiting for the premium podcast to be reviewing it, and not these poor simpletons at the Masonic Roundtable. I'm talking about the kings of Masonic excellence. That is the Masonic Light podcast. I want the Larry Merris breakdown of this. And I'm sure with Jason there poking him to wake him up after every other sentence, we'll be able to get a good insight into how good the paper really is.
Yeah, well, a Masonic Light podcast review of anything is worth listening to, even if it's just to hear Larry snoring in the background. But, it's fantastic. But shout out to Whence Came You, obviously, and Robert Johnson. What a fantastic podcast and friend. I did make the list of 21 extraordinary gentlemen. I was very shy. A lot of love. I can't say if my head gets any bigger, it probably won't fit on the screen here. So thank you to Robert Johnson for all his support. And also John Ruark and the Masonic Roundtable guys. Thank you so much. We love John. I incited John in my paper, and he's one of the greatest supporters and friends of myself. And I want to do a shout out to John. I hope he still listens to our podcast. He might have stopped listening many episodes ago, but he's a great supporter, and we thank you, John, for all your support. One thing before we get to you, Joseph, because I'm sure you've got a bit of a list of things you'd like to plug as well. The reason why that's all relevant is because on the 27th of April, the Victorian Lodge of Research is enabling me to present a paper on behalf of the Blue Lounge Social Club, which I've called Completing Our Allotted Task While As Yet Day. And obviously that paper is going to be dedicated to not necessarily a historical analysis of why the membership numbers have dropped, but rather some of the cultural, political and economic factors are going to set up our future challenges. 4 chapters in the first part, one dealing with the role of women, one dealing with the decline of religion in society, the next chapter dealing with millennials and how to deal with millennials, and the 4th chapter dealing with the changing influence of technology. So first part deals with setting out the challenges, second part sets out the solutions, which is actually proving to be the hardest part to write. Not that I don't have ideas, just finding a way to word it without sounding like I'm telling people what to do, which, as you know, is never a good way of doing things.
Jack, that's your natural state. I can imagine it's going to be one page. It's going to say, "Make Jack global dictator," and then you'll be like, "The problem solved." Oh
God, everyone should be very scared if you ask me. But 27th of April, Victoria Lodge of Research, get on board and support myself and the paper and the Blue Lounge Social Club. Now, Joseph, our guest from New Zealand, do you have any events you'd like to plug that we should know about and local New Zealand Freemasons should get along to?
There's one that a few lodges throughout the country are jumping on board with, and that's Yellow T-shirt Day.
Oh, fantastic.
The supporting children with cancer in New Zealand and abroad. There's a fellow named Jack in, I think it's Sydney. He's part of our charity as well. To make, like, March 17th is Chase's birthday, really. That's who the charity is named after. It's called the World's Brightest Day, not just New Zealand's.
So get along with that. So we could contribute online or something. Is that what we can do?
Or? Yeah, definitely. If you get lost, just go to my Facebook page.
No problem. You've been advertising. That's right. So 17th of March. That's obviously. We'll put the link in the show notes as well, so you can donate to that. Anything else we should be aware of that's coming up in your district or your area?
What's the date today?
11th.
11th. There you go.
On the 15th, Lodge Cowrie having the installation. Yeah.
Fantastic. And how would we get there? Where are they meeting and what time?
Visitors at 6:45 p.m. they're based in Onehunga in Auckland.
So get along to that event if you're possible. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that, Joseph, and thanks for your shameless plugs there. Now, I guess this has been quite a fun episode of the Brought to Light Masonic Podcast, episode 54. Our listeners are probably begging for the American host to come back next week. So be prepared for the fact that next week you will probably have another episode brought to you from Illinois, from the Blue Land Social Club of Illinois. So make sure you check out them and support them as much as possible. And once again, Bobby and Tyler did a fantastic job. Do you have any final thoughts, David, before we wrap up the episode?
No, I think it's been a fantastic discussion. And I just want to say thank you for Joseph for coming on. It's been so interesting to find out about New Zealand Freemasonry, and especially knowing that we keep referring to the fact that Freemasonry is going through a global issue of membership at the moment, and just everyone we speak to, whether it be in America, the UK, Australia, or New Zealand, everyone's experiencing the same thing. One thing I did find interesting with one thing you said, when you said there's only roughly about 7,000 or so members, I've been meaning to do this for a while on Australian Freemasonry. When you think about when everyone says, "Oh, Freemasons rule the world," Freemasons in New Zealand make up less than 1% of the, about 0.14% of the population there. So if we're ruling the world, that is a very powerful less than 1% of the population. But it does go absolutely to show that we need to get the word out there. I think it's fantastic that you guys are doing it and really adopting that, get the word out there of what we are, because we do need to dispel all these rumors that we're a death cult and all this other nonsense that people hear, and really bring it back to the core of, it's just a matter of blokes getting together, having, in our case, in probably most cases, listening to some boring business things, and then having a nice meal, and then getting out there and doing what we all care about, which is supporting the local communities. That's what I think we need to be plugging and ensuring we do. And I want to see more young people in the craft, because as a young person, when I joined the lodge, I had a few young friends, but when you go to some other lodges and everyone there's 70 or 80, you do understand why they tend to leave. Unfortunately, they've just got nothing really in common. So we need to get the young members out there. And I'm sure it won't be too long before Jack sets up a Blue Lounge in New Zealand. And as part of his plan to take over the universe.
Well, look, with people like Joseph in New Zealand, I'm very confident that we've got good footing, but also the future of Freemasonry in New Zealand is going to be strong as well, because it's got such passionate members like Joseph as well, which is so important. And reflect all those sentiments, and thank you again, Joseph. And I guess one of the main things also coming out of it is look at the example of how Freemasonry brings friends together from around the world. We've had the opportunity now to get Joseph on and hang out with him. It's been an absolute honour, and only Freemasonry could have done that. So if you are listening and you think about joining, just for the sake of just having friends around the world, it's worth it. It's an incredible set of relationships you build up, just because you happen to be part of the same organisation. So an incredible event. But Joseph, do you have any?
That's the thing.
Sorry, go David.
So I was just going to say, that's the thing. There really is no other organisation in the world where there's that level of brotherhood and connectiveness. Like, if you're part of Rotary here and Rotary in New Zealand, you're not actively communicating. But Freemasonry has a global brotherhood network. You meet anyone from anywhere in the world and say, "I'm a Freemason," they go, "So am I." They'll look after you. They'll treat you right and give you the tips of the local area. And I just think it's absolutely fantastic that Freemasonry does that in bringing literally men around the world together to communicate freely and openly.
Absolutely right. Joseph, I thought maybe, do you have any final thoughts or anything you want to say before we wrap up the show?
Personally, I think social media is going to save the craft in general.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Joseph. I think you're an example of that. I think someone who's really proudly out there on social media, and you're involved in a lot of social media groups as well, and you actively contribute to the discussion, and that's one of the finest observations I've heard. That's really true. Social media is going to save us. It's our window into the next generation. And if we're going to bring them on board, we've got to be where they are, and that's where it is. So,
yeah, for sure.
Very, very good final thoughts. Well, look, you've been listening to episode 54 of the Brought to Light Masonic Podcast. It's been dedicated to a discussion about Freemasonry in New Zealand, and obviously we've had our very special guest Joseph come on board to give us an insight into his experiences and also what Freemasonry is like across the ditch for us, and obviously in the Southern Hemisphere more broadly for people who listen from overseas. But thank you very much for listening to this episode. We will be back next week, and I do believe we're going to be back with another episode out of Illinois with Bobby Mitchell and Tyler Edens, and we look forward to them speaking to you then, and we'll be back in the next couple of weeks with another exciting and interesting conversation about Freemasonry. So look forward to that. And I'm your host, Brother Jack Aquilina.
And I'm your host, Brother David Illingworth.
And we really do thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay on the level, and we'll speak to you in the next couple of weeks.